Alright guys, so I'm out here on the water today, and what I'm doing at this moment is I'm trying to dial in the Bates EDC, and that's because we are in the middle of a DC reel war. Of course, we got the relatively new Bates EDC that seems to be sold out everywhere. I just tested the white hot Abu Garcia REVO Voltic, and the results were controversial. And of course, we have the usual suspects, Shimano's SLX DCs. In this battle, just as promised, since you guys gave me 300 likes, the new Bates EDC jumped out of the frying pan when it went up against the USDM or North American Market SLX DC, and now it's going into the fire because today in this video it's going up against the JDM SLX DC XT, which is a whole different class of reel. Now you might be wondering, why am I putting, this relatively budget Bates EDC up against a reel as ferocious as the SLX DC XT? Well, that's because right now, as of this video, at least as of a few days ago when I checked, on Digitaka, the SLX DC XT was priced right at $200. Of course, that's before any kind of tariffs. And let's talk about that just for a second, because I got an email just last night from someone asking me about tariffs. Now, I haven't bought anything from Japan in months. I'm trying to remember the last JDM reel I got, but I got that reel definitely before the tariffs hit. So of course, with current administration, we've been going back and forth on tariffs, and I think a few months ago the Supreme Court struck tariffs down. So honestly, I'm not sure what is going on with them, so I couldn't tell you. So anyone who has recently ordered something from Japan, let's say within the last month, if you're watching this video, let us know in the comments what you bought and what experience you had. But as of now, if there were no tariffs, the SLX DC XT would actually be cheaper overall from Digitaka because you don't pay any kind of a sales tax. Well, with the Bates, at least where I live, it's $199 and we have over 10% sales tax here. So you're looking at adding an additional $20. Now, I will say this, if Shimano America decided to bring the SLX DC XT over to the American market and start selling it here, that would be at least a $300 to $350 reel. But it is what it is. $200 at Digitaka for the XT, $200 for the EDC. So naturally, they are going to battle each other for your money. So I have both the EDC as well as the XT spooled up with 20-pound braid, 8-strand, and they're mounted on the same rod. And we're going to do a cast battle with the line counter. Now the problem with today is that the wind is just all over the place. As you can see, when I first started the video, it was very calm. Now it's kicked up. But not only is it all over the place, it just changes direction. So this is going to be pretty difficult. But the lure we're going to cast today is going to play into the Bates EDC's favor. And that lure is going to be the Whopper Plopper 60, which they list as being only 1/4 of an ounce. And the reason I say it plays into bait strengths, I guess, is because the bait spool is much lighter than the SLX DC XT spool by like almost 6 or 7 ounces. So it should excel with the lighter lures, and the spool on the EDC has a 1mm advantage over the SLX. But of course, Shimano, since they did pioneer digital braking technology, they've had a decent head start when it comes to firmware and programming and tuning their electronic brakes. As I get a pretty big backlash, I'm gonna have to turn the brakes down or up a little bit. So of course, with DC brakes, the programming is probably going to be the most important thing versus spool weight. All right, so I'm going to finish dialing in this EDC and we're going to start this battle. But before we start, let me know in the comments which reel you think is going to win. Personally, my money is on the SLX, but you never know. All right, so I think I got the baits dialed in. As you can see, the wind has completely died for now. So I'm going to try to cast out that way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to reel in as much slack line as possible before counting the distance with the line counter. All right, here we go. Now, of course, the base has been set up with the spool play minimized and then backed off to just have a hint of side-to-side play. The brake setting, once again, with the baits is stepless, so there's no clicks. But it looks like I have it on in between the 3rd largest and 4th largest dot. All right, here we go. First cast out of 5. All right, so there wasn't too much slack line on that cast. So let's see what the line counter says. Oh man, it's between 85 and 86 feet, so we'll say 86 feet. For cast 1, I thought it was going farther than that. All right, cast 2, let's go out this way. All right, I took in as much slack as I could before actually moving the lure. And let's see what the line counter says about cast 2. Now this is not one of those slick, super coated braids. In fact, this braid has no coating at all. But according to the line counter, in between 93 and 94 feet. So we'll say 94 feet for the second cast. Now the wind's kicked up. So I'm gonna have to wait till it dies down. You don't see it on the water just yet, but I can definitely feel it and hear it in the trees. And one thing I don't want to do is cast into the wind. Now it's blowing into my face. I will continue with cast 3 once the wind dies down. All right, cast 3. That seemed a bit short. Now remember, this is a 1/4 ounce lure. It's a whopper plopper, so it does have a propeller in the back that does catch wind, but the casting on a whopper plopper is consistent. Oh, it's in between 89 and 90 feet, so we'll say 90 feet. All right, cast 4. All right, so that felt like a good cast. I was able to reel in most of the slack line before it touched the water. "90 feet on the dot, so 30 yards. All right, last cast for the EDC. All right, was not able to reel in much slack there, but it wasn't too bad. All right, well, equaling its best cast, we're looking at in between 93 and 94 feet, so we'll say 94 feet. So let's get to the SLX DC XT. All right, of course, up next is the mighty SLX DC XT. And I will admit that getting the best out of these reels that have the IDC5 brakes can be time consuming. And what I mean by that is that with your 3 line modes internally and then the 5 fine-tuning adjustments externally, different combinations can provide different results. And it doesn't really depend on the line either. So since I have 20-pound braid on, of course everyone would think, you know, go to the braid mode setting. But what if I can go even lower on the brakes in the mono setting? But to make this simple today, and me not spending 30 minutes trying to dial in the SLX, I am going to put us in braid mode. So right now I'm in fluorocarbon. Gonna switch us over to braid, and the XT is gonna live or die in braid mode. All right, so we are in braid mode, which is the least restrictive brake setting, at least internally. I'm gonna start off on 4. So let's start casting. All right, so the Bates is definitely a quieter casting reel than the SLX. And if that's a bonus for you, then yeah, you could barely hear the Bates sometimes when casting, especially when the wind was blowing. You can definitely hear this XT. All right, so with 4, we are getting perfect spool control. So that means I'm gonna go down to number 3 on the external dial. The wind just kicked up into my face, but I'm gonna cast anyway. Hopefully that sunny glare isn't affecting the exposure too much on this GoPro. It probably is, but you'll get over it. So on 3, looks like we are still getting clean cast with no overrun. So I'm gonna go to 2. Now with such a lightweight lure, we're probably gonna see some overrun, but let's find out. No, we didn't. That's shocking. I'm gonna make sure I'm on braid mode. Yeah, I'm on braid mode. So we were on 2. And getting clean casts. Look to be going about the same distance as the Bates. What do you guys think? So if we can get clean casts with the brake setting on 1, it might be over for the EDC. All right, the wind is blowing into my face, but I'm gonna cast anyway. All right, simple sidearm cast there. There was some minor loops, but I think I can get away with it. So it's very surprising that technically this is the lowest setting you can go braking wise on the XT. I mean, if you need even less braking, there's really nothing much you can do. But the wind's died down, and let me see if I can get a clean overhead. Wow, we sure did. We got a clean overhead cast with the external dial set to 1. So that means we're gonna start measuring. All right, cast number 1. All right, so since that cast was pretty long, I was able to reel in a lot of that slack line, but visually it looked pretty equal to me. Whoop. The line counter says 99 feet for cast 1. All right, there's a slight wind coming into my face. We're gonna cast anyway, here we go. All right, cast 2. 90 feet. All right, so difference in 10 feet between the first and second cast, even though visually it didn't look like it. So I'm gonna wait till the wind dies down before we continue. All right, cast 3. All right. Now visually here, it looks like the SLX DC XT is casting a few feet farther than the Bates. I know your perspective is limited, but let me know in the comments what you think so far, which reel is winning. All right, so in between 94 and 95 feet, so we'll say 95 feet. And I gotta wait for the wind to die down again. All right, so I think this is cast 4. Here we go. All right, you guys probably didn't see where that landed because I didn't even see where that landed because of the sun, but it felt like a good cast. And the line counter is malfunctioning. Ugh. So we're gonna have to recast that. Now while I'm reeling this in, let's talk about some differences I feel between the two reels. Now immediately I can feel going from the Bates to this XT that the much longer Bates handle gives you better leverage. Now both of them are very smooth, but the DCXT adds that silky buttery feel that you don't get with the regular SLX DC. Both of them are very smooth, but the XT seems to insulate you from more vibrations. Here we go. Oh shit. I could not see where the lure was landing because of the sun, but let us hope that this cheap Berkeley line counter is functioning. There we go. Now, another thing that I feel is that the lure seems to jump off the rod easier with the XT. It's hard to explain. Whoa, 102 feet. I believe that was cast 4. But I'll go more into detail in the wrap up section when I get home. But we got one more cast to do with the XT. I can't see a dang thing. All right, we'll go this way. Here we go. All right, so I managed to get a good amount of the slack line reeled in. Now, just to let you know what's coming in the future, Billy definitely wants a comparison video between the Bates EDC and the new Abu REVO Voltic. So I'm definitely going to be doing that. So the DC reel wars will continue. But according to the line counter, that was 101 feet. So I think we have a clear winner here, the mighty SLX DC XT, but I'll go more into what I observed when I get home.
So I'm back at home, and of course the mighty SLX DC XT won this cast battle, but it did have to go all the way down to its lowest break setting to do so. Now the end results for the battle are that the Bates EDC averaged 90.8 feet, while the DCXT averaged 97.4 feet. So about a 7-foot difference between the two. And what I noticed casting wise was that once again, I mentioned this out on the water, but the lure seems to jump off the rod easier with the SLX XT, which allowed me to do line drive casts a lot easier. So it seems that superior brakes seem to win out over a bigger and lighter spool in this battle, but the EDC has nothing to be ashamed of. because it went up against a reel that is bordering on legendary status in the mighty SLX DC XT. And of course, the SLX benefits from over 20 years of digital braking, development, and refinement from Shimano. So if Bates comes out with another DC reel, hopefully they'll have developed the braking system a little bit more and give us something that compete with these Shimano DC reels. Alright guys, so once again I plan on doing a detailed comparison between the EDC versus the REVO Voltic to let you know what I think is the best US market $200 DC reel. So be on the lookout for that. Alright guys, thanks a lot.